everyone, welcome to back my channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before starting the video, please go ahead and hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. History is repeating and repeating and repeating itself on The Bold and the Beautiful. Nearly 25 years ago, there was a scene where Brooke Logan, Catherine Kelly Lang, was demanding that Ridge Forrester, then Ron Moss, choose between her and Taylor Hayes, then Hunter Tylo, on the spot. His initial response was to look like a jovial deer caught in headlights, unsure of what to say, but also loving the rush of the situation. Fast forward to now, and a similar situation is playing out between Brooke, Ridge, Thorsten Kaye, and Taylor, Rebecca Budig. But it is even more ridiculous now, and not just because both of these women are smart and beautiful. After their most recent reunion a few years ago, Ridge and Brooke swore to each other that this was it, for life. They had been through enough, with each other and with other loves, and now understood that they were meant to stay together. Brooke declared Ridge her destiny, and for quite a while, it was semi-believable. Since Ridge's zipper has usually been the problem, maybe he finally matured and saw the treasure of a woman in front of him. Maybe. That hope was short-lived because the moment that the couple had a real problem, he did what he always does. He found comfort almost immediately in bed, with Taylor rather than working through things at home. Ridge cannot stand to be alone, and he usually tries to justify his indiscretions to Brooke and blame her for them. This time around has been far worse than all the others because Ridge has completely decimated Brooke's daughter, Hope Logan, Annika Noel. In real life, there would be no coming back from the things that he has said. No matter what Hope has done, you just don't resort to calling your stepdaughter names and expect Brooke to stick around. That should have been a deal-breaker right there because the man that is your destiny wouldn't stoop that low, would he? Taylor is supposed to be a world-renowned shrink who can outthink all of us, but boy, does she have a real blind spot for the father of her children. Ridge has reconciled with her, only to run right back to Brooke so many times that it contributed to her broken heart syndrome. He felt guilty enough for the pain that he had caused her that he actually was invested in helping her to physically heal. Girlfriend was the beacon for female empowerment and life without a man for a solid 3 weeks before Ridge crashed into her life, as usual. The smart doc knew exactly what happened with Brooke, as well as knowing how this triangle always ends with her losing out. And after lending Ridge an ear, a shoulder, and everything else, she somehow thought that this time would be different. Apparently Taylor didn't read the psych book that teaches that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. Taylor's response to the selfish man who came back to her, promising a future that he likely knew he wasn't going to keep, should have been a hard pass. Instead, she decided to play house and has convinced herself that this time things are going to end differently. The reality is that Taylor is likely to end up with a real broken heart again. Is Ridge the only man in Los Angeles? Or are we just supposed to believe that he is top tier and worth fighting over despite his behavior? Either way, here we are with Brooke demanding that he pick one of them to spend forever with. Ridge is acting like a selfish child, and maybe that is exactly why Brooke uses her indoor voice with him. It's like listening to a mother try to reason with her 5-year-old who has just done something wrong. If that is Brooke's version of the love of her life, her destiny, then maybe they deserve each other. Maybe it's time for Taylor to move her brown wardrobe and clunky shoes off of the Forrester estate for good. The sun set over Los Angeles, casting an amber glow over the skyline as the inhabitants of the Forrester mansion navigated through the complex web of relationships that had defined their lives for decades. Ridge Forrester stood in the large window of his penthouse. The view of the city stretched out in front of him, but his mind was elsewhere, entangled in the lives of 2 women who had shaped his existence, for better or worse. Brooke Logan, Taylor Hayes. These were the 2 women who had always held his heart, who had pulled him in with their strengths and vulnerabilities, their joys and heartaches. Yet, for all their differences, they shared one thing, him. And it was this love triangle, this endless tug of war, that defined the very fabric of their lives. Rich had spent the better part of his life in this romantic cycle, and no matter how much he thought he had learned, no matter how many times he swore he was done, he always found himself back in the same place, circling the same drain, unable to escape the pull of the past. Part 1. The Unbreakable Bond. Rich sat in the office of Forrester Creations, staring blankly at the designs scattered across his desk. His mind was elsewhere, caught in the emotional turbulence that always seemed to accompany his feelings for Brooke and Taylor. It had been a long day of meetings, a day that felt like it might never end. But that wasn't what was bothering him. What bothered him was the fact that after all this time, he still didn't know where he stood with either woman. His heart tugged in one direction, then in the other. And the more he tried to push away the past, the more it seemed to rear its head, dragging him back into the drama, back into the endless cycle that he'd been caught in for years. It wasn't like he hadn't tried to move on, he had. He'd married both women, Brooke twice and Taylor once, and each time, something had gotten in the way. Their love had always seemed so promising, so real, only for some new obstacle to tear them apart. Yet despite the pain and the heartache, they always found their way back to each other. "Ridge, are you okay?" The soft voice of his daughter, Steffi, broke through his thoughts. She stood in the doorway of his office, concern etched across her face. Ridge looked up and forced a smile. "Yeah, Steph, just thinking." "You've been thinking a lot lately, Dad. Is it about Brooke or Taylor?" The question hung in the air like an elephant in the room. Ridge hesitated before answering, his fingers nervously tapping on the desk. "Both," he said quietly, his voice betraying a hint of vulnerability. Part 2. The Brooke Dilemma. Across town, Brooke Logan sat in her living room, staring at the engagement ring Ridge had given her. She had been through so much over the years: heartbreak, betrayal, reconciliation. But one thing had remained constant: her love for Ridge. Yet just when she thought they were on solid ground, Ridge always seemed to slip through her fingers. Her mind wandered back to the last time they were together. They had been so close to finally being happy. They had talked about their future, about their family, about growing old together. It felt so right, so perfect. But then Taylor had appeared. Again. Brooke's hands tightened around the glass of wine in front of her. The thought of Taylor, always the calm, composed and nurturing counterpart to her fiery personality, was a constant source of frustration. Taylor had always been the woman Ridge turned to when things got tough. She was the one he would turn to when Brooke wasn't there, and that reality always stung. Brooke knew Ridge loved her, but sometimes she couldn't help but feel like she was fighting a losing battle. Every time they seemed to take a step forward, something, or someone, would pull them 2 steps back. She stood up and walked over to the window, looking out at the city lights below. Her heart ached with the question she had been asking herself for months now. Was it worth it? Was it worth constantly fighting for Ridge, only to feel like she was losing him over and over again? Part 3. The Taylor Dilemma. Meanwhile, Taylor Hayes sat at the Forrester mansion, her mind racing as she thought about Ridge. It had been a long time since they had been together, yet she still found herself drawn to him. She couldn't help it. He was the love of her life, the man who had always been her rock. Even now, as she dealt with the pain of their past, a part of her still believed that maybe, just maybe, they could find their way back to each other. But she knew the reality. She knew the pull that Brooke had on Ridge, the way he seemed to gravitate toward her in times of need. Brooke had always been a thorn in her side, a constant reminder that the man she loved had been torn between them for years. Still, Taylor tried to keep her composure. She had learned long ago that no matter how much she loved Ridge, she had to keep a level head. She couldn't allow herself to fall into the same traps that had kept her in this endless cycle of heartache. The last time Ridge had reached out to her, it had been with the promise that things could be different this time. But Taylor knew better. She had heard those words before, only to watch them fade into nothing. Ridge was caught between his love for both women, and no matter how much he wanted to make a choice, he always seemed to end up circling back to the beginning. Part 4. The Love Triangle That Never Ends. It was a rainy afternoon when Ridge found himself in a familiar place, standing at the door of Brooke's house, his heart heavy with the weight of the decisions he had yet to make. He had promised himself he would not return to this place, that he would stay away and let Brooke move on. But here he was, knocking on her door once again. Brooke opened the door, surprise flickering across her face when she saw him standing there. "Ridge," she whispered. "Brooke," he replied softly, his voice filled with an emotion he couldn't quite name. There was a long pause as they stared at each other, both of them silently acknowledging the years of history between them, the love that had never truly disappeared. "I can't keep doing this," Brooke said, her voice breaking. "You're torn between me and Taylor, and I can't keep waiting for you to make up your mind." Ridge's heart sank. He knew what she meant. He had done this to her too many times, pulled her back in, only to push her away again. "I don't want to hurt you, Brooke," he said, his voice thick with regret. "But I don't know how to choose." Brooke's eyes filled with tears. "You don't have to choose. You already did, Ridge. You chose Taylor a long time ago." Ridge's chest tightened at her words, the truth of them cutting deeper than he had anticipated. Brooke had always been the passionate one, the one who fought for love no matter the cost. But now it seemed she was giving up, and that hurt more than he cared to admit. Before he could respond, his phone rang, the caller ID flashing Taylor's name. He hesitated, then answered. "Taylor?" "Ridge," Taylor's voice came through, calm, but with a hint of uncertainty. "I need to talk to you." Part 5. The cycle repeats. As Ridge sat in the dimly lit room, the echoes of his past with Brooke and Taylor seemed to swirl around him, pulling him in opposite directions. He had tried, so many times, to break free of the cycle that kept dragging him back into their orbit. But it was clear to him now. He could never truly escape. He was bound to them, bound to the love and the pain they brought into his life. For Brooke, it seemed, the fight was over. She had given him all she had, but now it was clear she couldn't keep waiting for a man who couldn't choose between her and Taylor. She deserved more than that, more than the half-hearted love that Ridge had been offering. For Taylor, the situation was different. She still believed in them, still clung to the hope that Ridge would choose her, that they could rebuild what they once had. But Ridge knew that her patience, too, had its limits. And so, as the rain continued to fall outside, Ridge found himself once again at a crossroads, unsure of where his heart truly lay. The truth was, he was caught in a cycle that he couldn't escape, a romantic drain that kept pulling him down, no matter how hard he tried to break free. And in the end, it wasn't about which woman he loved more. It was about the fact that, no matter how much he wanted to move forward, he kept finding himself circling back, again and again, to the same painful place. The romantic drain was deep, and no matter how many times Ridge tried to climb out, he always found himself slipping back into its depths. Conclusion. The Bold and the Beautiful had always been a story about love, heartbreak, and redemption. But for Ridge, Brooke, and Taylor, it was a story about a love triangle that never seemed to end. No matter how much time passed, no matter how much they tried to move on, they always circled back to each other, drawn by a force stronger than reason, stronger than time. For Ridge, the cycle was inevitable. And for Brooke and Taylor, the hope that one day, somehow, things would be different, was the only thing that kept them holding on. But in the end, it was clear. Love, for all its beauty and all its promise, was a drain that never truly let go. This creative exploration captures the essence of Ridge, Brooke, and Taylor's complicated love triangle in The Bold and the Beautiful. Thanks for watching this video, and please subscribe our Bold and Beautiful UPDAT YouTube channel for more update news.